Right. Nice to see you here. Yeah, thanks for the introduction, Laura. I'm a programmer. And I see a couple of programmers as well and few non-programmers. So, have you ever thought, why do we write code? Why do we write programs? I will let you think for a while. Because the most common answer I got for this is that we write programs because we need to give instructions to computers. And why do we do that? So the computer knows what to do, right? But the fact is that computer doesn't care. It doesn't care at all if we give instructions or not. It can loop, single loop, or just go through null operations in the processor and warm the room. So I believe that we are making programs so we can achieve something. We have something to do, and we just happen to use a computer as a tool. Like we use a spanner to tighten bolts and saw to cut wood. And then we use hammer, well, we use hammer just for hammering. Release stress, because if we need to put nails in the wood, we probably use power hammer, but that's not fun at all. So, and dynamite, very good tool, but, well, as itself, very fun too. So, I have an example. Oh boy, this is giving much. This is a variation of actual Jira item I've got. So, this is pretty easy, I think. This is quite of something like we can, as a programmers, do in 15 minutes. Pretty easy stuff. I took 2 days to implement this. One reason was that the code I was changing it had 20 lines of instructions of code and twice amount of comments. And if you have read Uncle Bob's book, Clean Code, you probably know that comments might be wrong. So changing the code which is really commented, you need to read comments, you need to read code, and change both. I did some of that. I got that code out of the function, made another function, and added tests, which were none before that. But then, what's wrong there? Because our business was that we were making service for serving paid content. Our business was to have a content and get people paid for it. So if we look at this, we were rewriting something. Well, that's another topic. Then if we are rewrite user in the service for represent service, we will not authorize. the user for the content. Doesn't make sense. So I used one day to find out why is that. The reason was that there was another service which was handling the authorization. But we didn't tell that there. So I wrote the code, submit it to version control, and then it got reviewed. And we find out that there were no chance to get that false in these preconditions. So we had a code which doesn't make sense if you read it. It was unnecessary, but still we have that Jira item, so we can, if we won't look at it further, we just implement it and have the code which has no meaning, and it doesn't get run, or it doesn't affect anything. But what I did, I insisted that code will be there, because the next one who is going to read that Boolean logic, he can read that there is a case where we need that being false. And we had a long discussion about do we include the code which is not needed. But as you said, my statement is that code is for communication. That was my thought there, and I then started to investigate why do we have this kind of Jira items. And what I found, I will talk to you today. Let's get to this very typical teamwork situation. We have somebody who has the money, who has the need. In this example, it's a taxi service. Doesn't matter which need it is. Then we have programmers, like I am, and many of you is. And then we have middlemen. Middlemen can be sales, for God's sake. Then we have project manager, or plenty of those. Then we have architects. Yeah, those are nice people. Once I told I'm an architect, but today I'm just developer because that's not as bad. So, and then we have, well, designers. I think that's I need to say that's a good thing. And then we have Jira. Well, yeah. And you think that, yeah, I know this stuff. This is kind of, well, things gets pretty nasty if you have Jira and project managers and architects saying that you need to use these libraries, and you need to report which libraries are you using and stuff like that. It was pretty common 10 years ago, and I hope it's not that common anymore. You think that doesn't affect you because you have your team, you don't have titles, or your titles are evangelists or those funny titles. And you don't use Jira, you use Post-it notes. You have a lot of those. More you have Post-it notes, better software you make. So, and then you might even have your application on your own. There's no anyone who has the money, so you are kind of making it for self. But what I have seen, here we have still the same problem. Some of those in the team make the application, who make the code, and some of people are architecting, and some of those are going to sell the product you are making. So it's not causing the problem there that those tools or titles. But here, what we are doing here as well, we are kind of trying to translate. We are going to translate the business need in the computer program, and that's something which causes a problem. That every time we translate something, it changes. We lose some information, and then when we lose some information, there is no information to write in the programs. Like in my example case, that item there in Jira that doesn't have the information I needed to write a good code. So when I'm suggesting that, don't do that. Just talk about your business, about what you are doing, what you are trying to achieve, what's the intent of your program. Try to slice that, and of course you need to write computer programs in the way that computer understands it, but more you have that information about the business, more you can write it into computer programs. You have that high-level abstraction there already, instead of having subsystems or logging microservices or microservices doing system calls to another systems. It doesn't make sense. So, big problem is that how do we write the code? And I have a few examples. But before that, I will introduce one idea my colleague came up when I was asking that what's the problem with our way of programming. That we often reach for high quality in our applications. We use mechanisms like immutable data structures, things like that, so we can achieve code which has no bug, or as less bugs as we can possibly have, and having good quality code is readable in the sense that you can change this afterwards. But it's kind of it is kind of quality, or those quality attributes are different compared to that our code is serving purpose. So if we are thinking, for example, we have plenty of examples of small startups using very lousy programming languages, and they are quite successful. One of these examples is, let's say, Facebook. I believe they are successful. And they started their work with a PHP. And PHP, for those non-programmers, is language which is known as being one where you have much difficulties to make bug-free software. Did I put that nicely? Okay, it's better today, but yeah, it still has problems. But then they still managed to do quite successful product, and I believe they were operating more in that serving purpose axis than in the quality axis. I haven't seen that code, so I can be wrong. But probably they were there, and then they started to use nice programming languages like Haskell, or I don't know, do they use that, but just for example. at least they use Scala, and they were moving I believe they moved in their quality axis upwards, but the code I have seen was those libraries they have published. So probably that make them move more in that direction. So that code is not anymore serving purpose, but instead of making nice libraries for programmers like us. But this is a good thing. You should librarize your common code. So I believe their core code, their business code, they can extract that code from their business logic and use the libraries instead. So I don't know where they are at the moment. You might argue that it's not working very well, so it might not be as high in quality access as that I would like have my code. But then our main tool writing a program is a clean code, and we should write our code like this. This is a news article, and the news article before the clickbait was written like this. I needed to go over 100 years ago to find article which is not clickbait. But in the title it says that what happened, and then it goes to more details, then it goes to more details, and then more details and more details. So we have this highest abstraction level first, where we can pretty much see that what is happening. So I have a code example. This is from TensorFlow library where you can access the actual TensorFlow. The TensorFlow itself, well, was not as good to present here. This is very typical. So if your project manager or your team member comes to you and asks, well, we have this parser routine there, so what was the format we are using? Then you go there and look at your code. Okay, I can see that. All right. In that format, we have this colon thing. Yeah, you know, colon. And the last colon. That's interesting. And then if that's minus, well, colon might, I don't know. But then the length is. Well, I don't know what's the format. So it's very typical code, and I rewrote this. This is written in Java. So at first I tried to use Java to make this nicer. I failed. So I changed that to Scala, and I used a couple of principles I want to introduce to you. These are from the Uncle Bob's book, Clean Code. And those are that I changed the name of first parameter, that it has operation name and index. Then I split out that actual code which seeks for the last column and makes the magic there. We don't care what's there at this point. And then we say that, yeah, we are splitting, well, separator is colon. And then we have 3 different occasions, what do we do? So we have this index there, then we might not have that index. And there's two cases we end up that operation to colon or not. And this code makes the same bugs as the previous one, but now it's more apparent. So the case that the index thing coming after colon makes an exception, like the previous one. And then, I don't know what they have thinking about having those colon in the operation name, because it leads to awkward situation when you don't have that index. So it's the same code, but probably you can now look better that with that abstraction, splitting that abstractions into two phases, and then using better naming, saying what's exactly happening, and then using the language where we are able to do that. So I have another example. After I've got this abstraction thing that I talked about, high abstraction level and low abstraction level. Here it's not the abstraction is high because it's higher on the code, but this is the best quote to say what's high or low abstraction level. It's for programming languages, but applies to our code. So if you need to look something that is not needed in your business logic, then you have low-level code, so you need to get that away from your highest abstraction level code. So I have another example. This is from Telegram chat application. And as we are looking to title, it's not a clickbait. Get place for photo. This is something I call as detective story code. You need to read that code, all of that code, to make sense of it or know what's happening. Sometimes you can, in detective stories, go to last page and see that who was the murderer, but then you're kind of missing something. Yeah, that's kind of it. If you are looking at how we get place for photo, and you start to read that, we have this A. Okay, we are looping something. Why it's A? I don't know. Why it's not I? I have no idea. A is a nice letter. Yeah, let's have it there. Then we get through it, and if we are getting place for photos, the first line mentioning photo is quite far away. And do we have an idea what's the place for the photo? Yeah, it didn't. We have so lousy resolution here, we didn't get it here. So, do you want to see how to make this better? I didn't have time to do that. So, and if I need to change this code, I wouldn't touch that, or it will take a couple of days at least. So, this is the way how, this is from Ruby on Rails. This is again something we always do. Most of our examples, even if you are in university, those examples are, you should use model view controller or some variation of it. Same thing with frameworks. If you are using framework which is putting your code in different directories by layers. So if we need to change, let's say we common example is to change the database layer. So if we need to change our database engine, it's easy. How many of you have changed the database engine in something you are making? Oh yeah, that happens. Yeah, I thought that it won't happen. Yeah, back from Mongo to something relational database. Yeah, that's happening today. Then, let's say we have the taxi as an example. If we have the taxi and we need to make, for example, rate our drivers. Okay, we probably need to make a view of it. Probably are going to store it somewhere. We change the model. We're probably making some kind of business logic to have that rating calculated. So we need to open all of these folders. So what I like to do, I like to put my directories in that way. Having directory for driver, and that's where everything happens. And if you insist, it's a common practice to have there in that directory that single file which is using the database functions. So, quickly recap this. These my picks from Robert C. Martin's clean code are these. Make the most important thing easy to find. The first thing you need to know what's the most important thing. Explain the intent in the code. Do not mix abstraction levels. Use expressive programming language if you can. And then use domain language, actual language you're giving a value to customers. So, when you are doing this, then you are able to answer your project manager that what's happening in your code, what's the intent, and then he or she might able to tell the customers that was our corner case in that case. So, we make compromises. Sometimes when we are achieving better quality, or those quality attributes like, let's say the performance is the best example, we might move from that purpose-serving axis closer to quality. The best place to be here that quality is good and that we can have the purpose in the code. Sometimes the curve is like that, so we are going through the better quality to code with serving better purpose. But in your team, try to discuss about these things. So, as we fail or we compromise, first, if we fail to write readable code or explain the intent, the next thing is to write comments. Comments are like I've read, those are always the failure expressing the intent in the code, but they can lie. And of course, write tests. For that example about that, what's the format of that output, what we are passing is the best way to communicate that is in tests. Write those examples, what kind of format you are handling there. And I like BDD because then we are writing those tests as much human readable format as we can, which is a good example that we can write program that's easy to read when somebody non-technical is asking about what does it do. if you fail on this, or at least write intent to commit message, write the reason why you have changed the code. Most common commit messages are that I have changed that in our parsing routine, that colon to dot. Yeah, I can see that. I can read the code. But write, why did you do that? And then we fail on those. Communicate with pull requests. Why did you do those things? Why did you go in quality axis and not the serving purposes axis more? There might be a reason. Communicate there. And last and most fun part. If you failed, write it again when you have better day. So that's the thing. Think about your business. Makes your salary higher, because that's what I thought yesterday when I met Alfred. He said that it's very hard to meet coders who can talk to business. Try yourself. You will be better persons. So, thank you.
Thanks, Heikki. And don't run away just yet. Let's have our Q&A session. We have a couple of questions on the message wall, so I'll get started with that. And then if you have any questions you want to ask in person, stick your hand up in a bit and we'll have a mic come around to you. There's a couple of anonymous questions, so let's start with those. They're from mobile, which I assume is anonymous. Heikki, who are the programmers that inspire you?
My colleagues. None of these things I have found myself. I've talk about this a lot, and when I can make applications better people than me, better programmers, that's best part. One single colleague of mine, Joni, we had very intense arguments, and every single time I was wrong. So that was humbling experience, and it inspires me a lot.
Is there something, let's say there are people out there who are looking for those kinds of teammates to work with. Yeah. What can you do to kind of facilitate that kind of relationship?
Yeah, I don't know. Probably following Twitter. And I'm not looking or watching those videos, those talks, but I know there are plenty of those who can write clean code and talk things like that, but I don't have an example here. That's a good way to check those. Uncle Bob, Robert C. Martin, has great inspiration of me, but there are few things that I don't agree with him. So it's but through him you can probably find better examples.
Cool. Next anonymous question is, can you give us a vivid example about your own projects where you saw the importance of good communication? They're basically asking for your worst nightmare.
Yeah. I tried to come up with one of the worst nightmares with that example, because I was shocked when I saw that Jira ticket, because I didn't have a clue what I need to do as a value-wise. I knew what I needed to do as a code, but not giving a value to the customer. But good examples in my previous projects, I have a colleagues here now when we made a quite big change in one of the systems, and then we tried to follow these guidelines I've given here. So I don't know, it's not my judgment to say was it successful project or not, because as a programmer, if I'm happy, it doesn't mean anything.
I believe this is the last one on the message walk. well, it's from Tony. How do you educate your team to start writing comments? Or is it easier to work somewhere else?
Very good, very good. This is a hard one because there are people who insist to have those codes. I don't know where does it come from, but first thing I'm asking that if you're having comments there, don't you believe in clean code then? Which is, yeah, so we can have more fruitful discussion with what do we need to pursue in our code.
Thank you. Do we have any questions in the audience? Hands up. There's a gentleman right there.
Yeah, hi. I was thinking if you dislike these kind of technical Jira issues where you describe this boolean that you have to change at some point in the code, then how about user stories? Because in my project, we tried to make everything a user story in the beginning, and at some point failed at that, but it gives this context for your stuff that you do.
Yeah, thanks. About the user stories, I like the idea that we are splitting the work as a user perspective, but plenty of cases I've seen that we are trying to write user stories. That example was written in the form of user story, but it didn't have any user value in that. So if you are writing user stories, make sure that those are user stories and not just in the form of user story. But yeah, that's a good start.
Do we have any more questions in the audience? I have a question. We can finish with that if there's no others. Let's say I'm on a team that has a project that's already started, so we're not starting from scratch. What can we do to better our communications around this?
Yeah. Depends on where you are with your project, but the worst cases are when you are started to use some kind of framework or you have already started to use some, well, if you are making like mobile UIs for Android or similar things that you are kind of forced to put your code in some kind of handler. That's the worst situation then. But my general example is that the first thing is to refactor your directory structure, or if you are making microservices, that you are trying to make those microservices in that way that it's serving user, it's some kind of user problem. Single microservice is solving single user problem, not our technical problem to access some kind of subsystem there. To refactor it there, it's a big job, but I think it's worth doing.
Great, thank you. Did anything else pop into mind with anyone? Stick your hand up if you did. Doesn't look like it. I think we're going to let Heikki go and get a drink and some snacks. Thank you very much. We're going to be continuing on the white stage with Robert Allen in about 15 minutes. See you in a bit. Thank you.
Thank you.